Elara's hand trembled, not from fear, but from a nascent, icy rage. The buzzing phone in her hand was no longer a symbol of her husband's betrayal, but a weapon, and she would learn to wield it. Her first target, the secrets it held. Every tap on the phone's screen was a hammer blow to the life Elara thought she knew. Julian Thorne, her Julian, the man who whispered promises of forever against her skin, the father of her unborn child, was a phantom, a carefully constructed illusion. The real Julian, it seemed, belonged to someone named Seraphina Dubois. The name itself sounded like a caress, a venomous whisper. Messages unfolded, each more damning than the last. Clandestine meetings at the Crimson Orchid, a notorious lounge in the glittering, vice-laden city of Las Venturas. Weekends away under the guise of unavoidable business trips. Photographs. So many photographs. Julian laughing, his arms slung casually around Seraphina's shoulders. The city lights of some far-flung metropolis twinkling behind them like scattered diamonds. Seraphina, stunningly beautiful, a siren in silk, her eyes fixed on Julian with an intimacy that made Elara's stomach clench. Intimate, carefree. While Elara, his pregnant wife, waited at home, a fool in their gilded Port Siena cage. The pain was a physical entity, coiling in her chest, stealing her breath. It would have been so easy to shatter the phone, to scream until her lungs burned, to confront Julian and unleash the torrent of her agony. But then, a different voice, cool and steady, cut through the roaring inferno of her emotions. Grandma Isabel, a woman forged in hardship, whose wisdom was as sharp and enduring as winter frost. When the wolves howl, Elara, her grandmother used to say, her eyes clear and knowing, don't howl back, become the silent frost. Freeze them in their tracks. Fight fire with frost. The mantra echoed in Elara's mind, a lifeline. Her resolve hardened, the searing pain transmuting into something cold, something potent. This wasn't just about an affair, was it? That first cryptic message about the nightingale and an asset still hummed with an ominous frequency. This was deeper, darker. And if Julian was capable of such profound betrayal in their marriage, what else was he hiding? With a newfound, chilling calm, Elara moved through their palatial home, each familiar luxury now feeling like a prop in an elaborate stage play. His opulent home office, a sanctuary of dark wood and expensive leather, felt particularly violated. Julian had always been secretive about his work, the inner workings of Thorne Dynamics, a fortress she was never invited to truly enter. Now she was breaching its walls. She remembered the code to his personal safe, hidden behind a ridiculously oversized abstract painting. An anniversary, he'd once told her, a date supposedly significant to their early courtship. Another lie, she now realized, just a random string of numbers designed to placate her curiosity. Her fingers, surprisingly steady, keyed it in. The heavy door swung open with a well-oiled sigh, revealing neat stacks of documents. Property deeds, the Port Siena penthouse they lived in, a sun-drenched coastal villa in Monte Marina she'd only visited twice, a sleek, minimalist loft in New York City she hadn't even known he owned, stock certificates for Thorne Dynamics, bundles of them, representing a fortune that made her head spin, and a life insurance policy. Her name listed as the sole beneficiary. A cruel irony that wasn't lost on her. Standard billionaire paranoia or something more sinister? Then, tucked away at the very back, beneath a velvet cloth, she saw it. An old, heavy, leather-bound ledger. It wasn't new or sleek like Julian's other possessions. This felt ancient. Its cover was worn, the leather cracked in places, and it was secured with a tarnished brass lock. Curiosity element 1, indeed. It felt cold to the touch, almost unnervingly so, as if it held secrets that actively resisted the light. What was this? An anachronism in Julian's otherwise hypermodern world. She jiggled the lock, her heart thumping, firmly secured, no key in sight. She resisted the sudden savage urge to find a heavy paperweight and smash the lock open. No, rashness was not part of the plan. Patience, precision, frost. Her own phone became an extension of her will. Click, click, click. Meticulous photographs of every document, every damning page, every hidden asset, and several close-ups of the locked ledger, its mysterious lock, the texture of its worn leather. This evidence was her ammunition, this cold resolve, her shield. She was just carefully replacing the last file, her mind already racing miles ahead, plotting her next move, when she heard it, the distinct purr of Julian's sports car in the driveway. Julian, back, unexpectedly. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through her. No, not now. Her breath hitched. It was too soon. She wasn't ready. A heart-stopping, frantic scramble ensued. Documents shoved back, the ledger replaced, the velvet cloth smoothed, the safe door swung shut with a click that sounded deafening in the sudden silence of the house. She spun the dial, locked it, her hands fumbling slightly, then darted from the office, just as she heard his key in the front door. She was halfway to the kitchen, feigning a search for a glass of water, when he walked in, impeccably dressed as always, but with a slight frown etching his handsome features. His eyes, those captivating blue eyes that had once held her world, swept over her. Did he see the tremor in her hands, the wildness in her eyes? "Everything all right, darling?" Julian asked, his voice a smooth baritone that usually soothed her, but now grated like sand. He strolled closer, placing a proprietary hand on her swollen belly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Elara forced a smile, a brittle, unconvincing thing she hoped he wouldn't scrutinize too closely. Oh, she'd seen a ghost, all right, the ghost of the man she thought she'd married. "Just a bit tired, Julian," she managed, her voice surprisingly even. "The baby's been active." A convenient excuse. Always. He seemed to accept it, his attention already drifting. Probably back to Seraphina, or the nightingale, or whatever other damn secrets he was keeping. The sheer audacity of his casualness, the ease with which he wore his deceit, it was breathtaking. How could she have been so blind? Or was he just that good an actor? The questions churned, but she pushed them down. Focus, Elara, Frost. Later that afternoon, as Elara was methodically cataloging the photographed evidence on a new encrypted laptop, the house landline shrilled. Not his mobile, which she knew he'd be missing by now, but the landline. Clever. He didn't want a record of this call on his mobile bill, perhaps? Or maybe he just wanted to hear her voice, gauge her reaction when he asked. She let it ring 3 times before picking up, schooling her voice into a tone of mild, wifely concern. "Hello?" "Sweetheart," Julian's voice, feigning a breezy casualness that didn't quite reach his eyes, she imagined. "So terribly sorry to bother you, but I seem to have, well, I've been an idiot and left my phone at home. On the kitchen counter, I think. Could you possibly do me a massive favor and bring it to my office? Some rather important calls I'm expecting." Important calls? From Seraphina, no doubt. Or perhaps about that nightingale. Elara's fingers tightened on the receiver. The audacity. Did he really think she was that oblivious? That compliant? Maybe he did. Maybe that had been her greatest failing. Or perhaps her greatest advantage now. Her voice, when she replied, was honey smooth, a perfect mimicry of the devoted wife. "Of course, Julian. Anything for you. I'll run it over straight away. Don't you worry about a thing." Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The performance of her life was about to begin. And she wouldn't just be delivering a phone. She'd be delivering the first silent declaration of war. Julian's request to bring the phone felt like a trap, or perhaps an invitation to step onto his turf, into the viper's nest of Thorne dynamics. So be it, Elara thought, her fingers closing around her own phone, now laden with secrets. Let the games begin. The towering glass and steel of the Thorne Dynamics headquarters seemed to pierce the Port Sienna sky, a monument to Julian's ambition, and, Elara now suspected, his deceit. She walked in, Julian's phone nestled in her designer handbag like a venomous snake, her own phone a silent, potent weapon pressed against her thigh. The air in the lobby was cool, almost sterile, thick with the unspoken secrets of high finance and ruthless power plays. This was Julian's kingdom, and she was about to trespass. The elevator ascended through Thorne Dynamics like a rising tide of anxiety, floor after gleaming floor. But Elara Vance felt a strange, almost preternatural calm descend upon her. She was the storm about to break. No turning back now, was there? She clutched the bag tighter. Julian's office occupied nearly half the top floor, a testament to his ego and his success. His assistant, Olivia Hayes, was stationed at a massive foyer, minimalist desk just outside his imposing oak doors. Olivia was young, impeccably dressed in a severe gray suit that did little to hide the nervous energy radiating from her. Her eyes, wide and doe-like, darted towards Elara, then away, a flicker of something unreadable. Fear, pity, crossing her face. "Mrs. Vance," Olivia said, her voice a little too high-pitched. "Mr. Thorne isn't in yet, but he's expecting you about the phone?" Elara offered a practiced, wifely smile, the kind she'd perfected over years of playing the supportive spouse at countless corporate events. Yes, Olivia. He seems to have misplaced it. Silly man. She retrieved Julian's phone, holding it out, such a small object to cause such monumental devastation. As Olivia Hayes took it, her fingers brushing Elara's briefly, Elara's gaze was drawn to an office door, slightly ajar just down the corridor. A polished brass nameplate gleamed. Seraphina Dubois, Director of Special Acquisitions. Director of Special Acquisitions? What in God's name did that even mean? It was a title far more intriguing, far more deliberate than simply Mistress. It hinted at a level of integration into Julian's professional life, into Thorne dynamics itself, that sent a fresh wave of nausea through Elara. This wasn't some casual fling. This was something else entirely, something woven into the very fabric of his empire. Through the slight opening, Elara caught a fleeting glimpse of the occupant. Seraphina Dubois. Even in that brief snapshot, a fall of raven hair, a glimpse of a tailored crimson dress, a hand adorned with a bold, glittering ring gesturing dismissively as she spoke into a headset, Seraphina radiated an almost tangible aura of confidence and predatory grace. And then Elara saw it. Glinting at Seraphina's throat, a striking, intricately crafted snake-shaped ruby brooch. Its eyes seemed to glitter with malevolent intelligence. Curiosity element 3, indeed. A shiver traced its way down Elara's spine. This woman was no mere dalliance. She was a player, a significant one. Olivia, flustered by Elara's fixed gaze, stammered, "Miss Dubois, she's, very new. Joined us just a few months ago. Very efficient. Mr. Thorne values her input greatly. Handles his more sensitive projects." Sensitive projects. Elara's mind raced. The Nightingale, the asset, the locked ledger. Were these Seraphina's sensitive projects? The implications were chilling. How deep did this rabbit hole go? And who was this Seraphina Dubois, really? A corporate climber? A con artist? Or something far more dangerous? Elara pulled her gaze away, offering Olivia another tight smile. "I see. Well, do tell Julian I dropped by." She turned, her composure a carefully constructed dam against the flood of questions and rising fury. She needed to get out of there. She needed to think. She needed allies. The moment the elevator doors whispered shut, Elara pulled out her own phone. Her fingers flew across the screen, dialing a number she knew by heart. Chloe Davies. Her best friend, her rock. Chloe was a force of nature, a sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal woman who had navigated her own brutal divorce from a wealthy, cheating bastard named Marcus Cole, and had emerged, not unscathed, but certainly victorious. If anyone would understand, it would be Chloe. "Elara, what's up? You sound weird." Chloe's voice, usually so full of vibrant energy, was laced with concern. Tears pricking her eyes, Elara poured out the story. The forgotten phone, the cryptic messages, the other woman, Seraphina Dubois, the title, the snake brooch, the chilling feeling that this was about so much more than simple infidelity. She omitted nothing, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain and dawning anger. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, Chloe exploded. "That son of a bitch! Julian Thorne, I swear to God, I will personally key his ridiculously expensive car. Are you okay?" "No, stupid question. Of course you're not okay." "Okay. Breathe, Elara. Breathe with me. We don't get mad, we get everything. You hear me? Everything he has, everything he's hidden, will bleed him dry." Chloe's fury was a balm to Elara's raw nerves. It felt good to have someone unequivocally in her corner. "Listen to me," Chloe continued, her voice now steely with determination. "You need a shark. Not just any lawyer, a goddamn great white. I know a guy. Alistair Finch. He financially flayed Marcus Cole and left him with nothing but his golf clubs. Finch is your man. He specializes in, let's call them, complex marital asset investigations for the obscenely wealthy and terminally deceitful." The meeting with Alistair Finch took place the very next day in his discreet, understated office on Onyx Avenue, a world away from the ostentatious glamour of Thorne dynamics. Finch was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with piercing gray eyes that seemed him to miss nothing, and a calm, almost unnervingly placid demeanor. He listened intently as Elara, Chloe by her side for moral support, recounted her story, spreading out the photographs of the documents from Julian's safe, the screenshots from his phone, the details about Seraphina, and her ominous title. She even described the locked ledger. Finch steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable. When Elara finally finished, her voice hoarse, he was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the photo of the ledger. "Mrs. Vance," he said at last, his voice grave, measured. "The affair, as painful as it is frankly the least of your concerns here. This pattern, these undeclared properties, the mention of a locked ledger of this nature, the haste with which this Miss Dubois and her special acquisitions have been integrated, this suggests a systematic attempt at asset concealment, potentially significant fraud. We may be looking at something far beyond a divorce settlement." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "We need more than my expertise in family law. We need a ghost. Someone who can find things that don't want to be found." Elara's heart sank. Fraud? This was spiraling into a nightmare she couldn't have imagined. What had Julian done? Finch leaned forward. "I have someone in mind. Zara Kim. She's a private investigator, the best there is in Port Siena for this kind of work. Ex-intelligence, a specialist in forensic accounting and unearthing secrets the powerful pay fortunes to keep buried. She's discreet, she's relentless, and she's not easily intimidated. But she's also expensive, and the kind of work she does can stir up hornets' nests." He held Elara's gaze. "Are you prepared for that?" Was she? Could any woman be prepared to learn her husband might be a serious criminal? Could she handle the fallout, the danger? She looked at the tiny swell of her belly. Her child, Julian's child. A child who deserved a future free from the taint of its father's... what? His crimes? The word tasted like ash in her mouth. Elara straightened her shoulders. Grandma Isabel's face flashed in her mind. "Frost. Yes, Mr. Finch? I'm prepared. Do whatever it takes." Alistair Finch nodded slowly. "Very well." Zara Kim's first call to Elara came later that evening, a voice from an encrypted number, cool, professional, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was chilling. "Mrs. Vance, Alistair Finch has briefed me on the preliminary details of your situation. What you're describing, the kind of assets Mr. Thorne is allegedly trying to conceal, the corporate structure. Men like Julian Thorne don't just hide money. They bury bodies, metaphorically speaking. Sometimes literally, though let's hope not in this case. Digging them up is my specialty." A beat of silence. "But be warned, it will get dangerous. He will have layers of protection, and he will fight back if he senses exposure. Are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed?" Elara's breath caught. "Dangerous?" she echoed into the phone, her gaze drifting to her swollen belly. The future she had envisioned, the safe, loving world she wanted for her child, felt like it was dissolving into shadows. But what was the alternative? To live a lie? To let him win? No, absolutely not. "Miss Kim," she said, her voice hardening, the earlier tremor gone, replaced by that familiar, icy resolve. "I'm already in danger. Julian Thorne just doesn't know his prey is about to become the hunter. Find everything." Zara Kim was a phantom, moving through the opulent underbelly of Port Siena. Her updates to Elara were sporadic, delivered through encrypted channels, each one a small chisel chipping away at Julian Thorne's fortress of lies. Every secret Zara Kim unearthed felt like another thread pulled, threatening to unravel the entire tapestry of Julian Thorne's life. And Elara watched, her patience a predatory stillness. She learned to live with the knot of ice in her stomach, the constant, thrumming anxiety that became her unwelcome companion. But with each revelation, her resolve solidified. She was doing this for her child. For herself, the private investigator, Zara Kim, was worth every exorbitant penny Alistair Finch had quoted. The first wave of her findings landed in Elara's secure inbox like a precision strike. Photos and meticulously documented details of Julian and Seraphina Dubois's clandestine meetings at the Azure Cove Hotel, a ridiculously discreet luxury establishment nestled on a private stretch of coastline, miles from prying eyes. It was their preferred love nest, apparently. Or perhaps their business headquarters. The lines blurred with every new piece of surveillance. There was undeniable evidence of lavish spending. Receipts for couture clothing Elara had never seen, eye-watering bills for vintage champagne, and a particularly galling charge for a diamond tennis bracelet that certainly wasn't adorning Elara's wrist. All likely funded by Thorne Dynamics. Or worse, siphoned from accounts Elara was only now beginning to suspect existed. Was this how Julian spent the profits from his sensitive projects? It was a sickening thought. Then came the financial deep dive. Zara, with her background in forensic accounting, was a bloodhound when it came to money trails. she swiftly uncovered JT Equity, a shell corporation Julian had established years ago, dormant until recently. Now it was very much active. Funds, initially small, almost negligible amounts, were being funneled into it from various Thorne Dynamics subsidiary accounts. These sums grew progressively larger, a steady hemorrhage of capital, before vanishing into a complex web of untraceable offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and, more disturbingly, Zurich. Zurich, that bastion of secretive banking. What was Julian hiding there? Something far more significant than just covering the expenses of an affair, surely. Zara's notes were chillingly concise. Seraphina Dubois is more than a passive recipient of Thorne's largesse. Her signature appears on several JT Equity transfer documents, authorizing substantial payments to undisclosed consultants. The capacity listed? Lead negotiator. And that snake brooch she favors? It's custom-made, valued at over $250,000. Possibly more than just jewelry. Could be a key, an access device. High-level security often incorporates such things. A lead negotiator for what? And that damned snake brooch. Elara remembered the cold gleam of its ruby eyes. Could it really be a key? To what? A safe deposit box in Zurich, perhaps? The possibilities made her head spin. This was so much bigger, so much uglier than she could have ever imagined. The sheer scale of Julian's asset concealment was astounding. How could one man be so deceitful, so greedy? Just as Elara was absorbing the shock of Zara's report, an anonymous, heavily encrypted email landed in her inbox. Curiosity element 2, indeed. It was short, almost curt. Attached was a file, a partial list of JT Equity transactions, dates, amounts, and routing numbers, information far more detailed and damning than even Zara had managed to unearth so far. Some transactions were coded with single cryptic words: Nightingale shipment, Project Icarus setup, Serpent's Kiss bonus. What did it all mean? The sender ID was a string of random characters. The accompanying message was even more unsettling. The serpent guards more than gold. Look to the Nightingale's first flight. Some allies prefer the shadows. Elara stared at the screen, her blood running cold. Who was this anonymous informant? A disgruntled employee within Thorne Dynamics? A rival of Julian's? Or was it Seraphina herself, playing some unfathomable double game? Friend or foe? The ambiguity was terrifying. This secret ally, if that's what they were, clearly knew about the Nightingale, a term that resonated with the very first cryptic text she'd seen on Julian's phone. But what was its first flight? And what did it have to do with the serpent, Seraphina and her brooch? The questions piled up, each more disturbing than the last. This was like peeling an onion, each layer revealing a more rotten core. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the Port Siena penthouse grew increasingly strained. Julian's demeanor shifted. The charming, attentive husband became a ghost, replaced by a stressed, irritable stranger who spent long hours locked in his study, emerging only to snap at the staff or offer Elara distracted, hollow pleasantries. He started mentioning an aggressive internal audit at Thorne Dynamics, blaming it on new market pressures and hostile takeover rumors. He even boasted to Elara one evening, his voice tight with an unnatural bravado, about implementing state-of-the-art cybersecurity measures to protect the company's assets. "Can't be too careful these days, darling," he'd said, his eyes glinting strangely. Too many sharks in the water. Was she one of those sharks? Did he suspect her? His gaze began to linger on Elara more often, a calculating predatory scrutiny that made her skin crawl. He'd watch her across the dinner table, his eyes narrowed, as if trying to read her thoughts, to gauge her loyalty. The questions became more pointed, veiled inquiries about her day, her calls, her meetings with that firebrand friend of yours, Chloe. Elara parried his suspicions with the practiced ease of a seasoned actress, playing the part of the blissfully ignorant, slightly bored pregnant wife. But inside, she was a taut wire of anxiety. How much did he know? Or was it just his own guilty conscience making him paranoid? One evening, he found her in the library, idly flipping through a financial journal, a deliberate act on her part, testing his reaction. "Taking an interest in my business, darling?" he asked, his voice deceptively smooth, but his eyes were cold, watchful. Elara feigned a light laugh. "Just wondering how our little empire is faring, Julian, with all these market pressures you mentioned." The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. He stared at her for a long moment, Then his lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Our empire is stronger than ever, my love. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it." The condescension was a slap in the face, but Elara merely smiled back, sweetness personified. Later that night, another encrypted message from her anonymous source arrived. It was chillingly brief. "He knows someone is watching. The serpent is coiling. Be careful. The first casualty in a war of secrets is often trust." The warning chilled Elara, but also firmed her resolve. "Let him coil," she whispered to herself, her hand resting protectively on her belly, where her own little nightingale was stirring. "I'm weaving a net, not a web." Then Zara Kim's most explosive message yet arrived, a simple text that made Elara's world tilt on its axis once more. Zara's text was blunt. "Julian and Seraphina, private jet to Las Venturas, tomorrow. Booked at the Oracle Casino and Resort. Dinner reservation, private room, the Crimson Orchid. He told you it was a tech conference in San Francisco, didn't he? This is it, Elara. They're moving something big, but be careful. I found a high-end GPS tracker on my car this morning. They're hunting back." The desert air of Las Venturas was supposed to be dry, but Elara felt like she was drowning in Julian's lies, each feigned word of affection a wave pulling her under. The charade of his departure for the San Francisco Tech Conference was almost unbearable. His kisses were cold, mechanical. His promises to call, hollow echoes in the opulent emptiness of their Port Siena penthouse. She played her part, the supportive, slightly anxious pregnant wife. It was a role she was beginning to despise, yet one she knew she had to maintain. What choice did she have? The moment the door clicked shut behind him, the sound reverberating like a gunshot in the sudden silence, she was on a secure line to Zara Kim. Her hands were shaking, not with fear this time, but with a volatile cocktail of rage and anticipation. This was it. This trip to Las Venturas. It felt pivotal. In the neon-drenched jungle of Las Venturas, Zara Kim was a ghost, a whisper in the digital ether. Her surveillance photos, delivered in encrypted bursts to Elara's burner phone, painted a damning picture. Julian and Seraphina Dubois, emerging from a private jet, not arm in arm like lovers, but with the focused intensity of business partners on a critical mission. Later, at the Oracle Casino and Resort, a palace of shimmering excess, they weren't gambling or enjoying the shows. They were ensconced in a secluded alcove at the Crimson Orchid, its velvet drapes drawn tight against the outside world. Zara's long-lens shots, grainy but unmistakable, showed them huddled over a sheaf of documents spread across the table. Seraphina, animated, her crimson-tipped finger jabbing at clauses, her expression fierce. Julian, listening intently, his face grim, nodding, occasionally interjecting with a sharp question. This was no lover's tryst. This was strategy. This was conspiracy. Then came the most electrifying shot, a close-up, somehow captured through a momentary gap in the drapes. Seraphina, her ruby snake brooch gleaming like a malevolent eye at her throat, was slipping Julian a small, ornate, antique-looking key. It was intricately carved, almost Gothic in design, and bore a disturbing resemblance to the serpent motif of her brooch. What did it unlock? Elara's mind immediately flashed to the locked ledger in Julian's safe. Could this be its mate? The key to unraveling everything? This isn't a romantic getaway, Elara. Zara's voice, a low, dispassionate murmur over the encrypted line, confirmed Elara's chilling suspicions. This is business. Dirty business. They're moving assets, finalizing something critical. That key, it's important. Very important. And Seraphina is no mere mistress. She's a linchpin in whatever Julian is building or hiding. A pause then. And that tracker I found? It wasn't amateur hour. They're serious. You need to assume your home is no longer secure. Every conversation, every device, consider it compromised. Back in Port Siena, the walls of the penthouse felt like they were closing in. Every shadow seemed to hold a listening ear. Every electronic device a potential spy. Elara felt exposed, vulnerable. Could Julian really be watching her, even now? The anonymous tip she'd received just hours before Zara's update about the Las Venturas trip now seemed even more significant. It had been brief, almost a fragment. Nightingale is not a bird, it's a vault, for art. Untraceable. Millions in every brushstroke. The first flight was from Zurich. Art? Untraceable art? Zurich. The pieces were beginning to coalesce into a terrifying mosaic of high-level financial crime. Was this what Julian was involved in? Laundering money through priceless masterpieces? The Nightingale Protocol, it was a symphony of deceit. Then, the unthinkable. Julian returned home a day earlier than expected. No warning, no call, just the sound of his key in the lock, sending a jolt of pure adrenaline through Elara. She was in the study, the very heart of her clandestine operation, surrounded by a sea of incriminating documents. Zara's latest surveillance reports from Las Venturas, Alistair Finch's legal strategies, printouts of offshore account details, and the anonymous tip about the Nightingale art vault. Her blood ran cold. There was no time to gather them, to hide them properly. Panicked, she did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed the heavy cashmere throw from the sofa and flung it over the entire damning spread. Julian walked in, his expression unreadable. He looked tired, stressed, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "Darling," he said, his voice a low rumble. "What are you doing in here? I thought you'd be resting." His gaze swept the room, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on the cashmere throw draped haphazardly over the large mahogany coffee table. A table that was usually bare, save for a few art books. Did he notice the unnatural bulge? The slightly skewed angle of the throw? Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, like a trapped bird. "Just looking for a book," she stammered, her voice a little too breathless. She gestured vaguely towards the towering bookshelves. "Couldn't sleep. The baby's been kicking up a storm." It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. Julian gave her a long, searching look, a look that peeled back layers of her composure. "You seem on edge, Elara. More than usual." He took a step closer. Was he going to lift the throw? Was this it? Was her entire meticulously constructed plan about to come crashing down? Just then his phone, his other phone, the one he always carried, buzzed on the console table near the door. His eyes flickered towards it. A call from SD, Seraphina Dubois, of course, saved by the Mistress. The irony was almost too much to bear. He grunted, a sound of annoyance, and turned to take the call, stepping out into the hallway. "What is it now, Seraphina?" he muttered, his voice low and urgent, but not low enough. Elara didn't wait. In a flash, she swept the documents from under the throw, her hands trembling, and bundled them into a large leather tote bag she'd strategically left nearby. She then hurried to their bedroom, her pulse racing, and concealed the bag deep within her walk-in closet, behind a row of seldom-worn evening gowns. Safe. For now. But it had been too close, far too close. Later that night, the house was quiet, too quiet. Elara lay in bed, feigning sleep, every nerve ending screaming with tension. She heard Julian pacing in his study directly below their bedroom. His voice, though muffled by the floor, was sharp, angry. She crept out of bed, her bare feet silent on the plush carpet, and pressed her ear to the door of his study. "The Nightingale Protocol is showing anomalies." Julian's voice was a furious, hushed roar. "Damn it, Seraphina. I told you to ensure that ledger was absolutely secure. We moved it for a reason. No loose ends. Do you understand me? If that ledger surfaces, if anyone even suspects what's in it, we're both finished, utterly finished." Elara's blood ran cold. The Nightingale Protocol, the ledger, it was all connected. And Julian was terrified of it being exposed. Not just of the affair, not just of the siphoned money, but of the ledger. That ancient, locked book held the key to his ultimate destruction. And Seraphina Dubois was his accomplice, perhaps even his Achilles heel. The fear in Julian's voice was a new, potent weapon in Elara's arsenal. He was rattled. The ledger was his Achilles heel, and Seraphina was inextricably tied to it. The very next evening, Julian dropped his own bombshell, a carefully planned move disguised as a casual announcement. The fear in Julian's voice was a new, potent weapon in Elara's arsenal. He was rattled. The ledger was his Achilles heel, and Seraphina Dubois was inextricably tied to it. The very next evening, Julian dropped his own bombshell, a carefully planned move disguised as a casual announcement. "Darling," Julian announced over dinner, his smile a predatory gleam that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm hosting a small, rather important business dinner here tomorrow night. A few key executives from Thorne Dynamics, and Seraphina, of course. Our new director of special acquisitions has been making quite the splash. I want you to shine as the perfect hostess." Elara felt a chill despite the warm Port Siena air. The battlefield was no longer distant. It was being set in her own home. Was this a test? A power play? Or did he genuinely believe she was still his oblivious, adoring wife? The audacity was breathtaking. How could he even think of bringing his mistress into their home, to parade her in front of his colleagues, in front of her? The question hung heavy in the air between them, unspoken but screaming. The crystal glasses chimed the following evening, a fragile, tinkling sound against the steel of Elara's resolve as Seraphina Dubois, the serpent, glided into her home. The dinner party was an exercise in excruciating tension, a masterpiece of social hypocrisy. Elara, radiant in a deep sapphire gown that accentuated the gentle swell of her pregnancy, played the gracious hostess with an Oscar-worthy performance. She was all smiles and gentle inquiries, her voice a soft murmur of welcome. Julian, for his part, was expansive, charming, the benevolent patriarch of Thorne dynamics, holding court among his senior executives. And then there was Seraphina. She arrived last, a vision in emerald green silk that clung to her statuesque figure like a second skin. The infamous ruby snake brooch glittered malevolently at her throat, its eyes seeming to follow Elara's every move. Seraphina offered Elara a dazzling predatory smile. "Elara, darling, you're absolutely glowing. Julian talks about you constantly. It's such a pleasure to finally meet the woman who captured his heart." The insincerity was so thick, Elara could have choked on it. Elara returned the smile, hers just as false, just as dangerous. "Seraphina, how lovely to finally have you in our home. Julian has told me so much about your special talents. Director of Special Acquisitions, is it? It sounds formidably impressive." What special talents, she wondered? Bedroom acrobatics? Or something far more financially nefarious? Throughout the meticulously prepared 5-course meal, Elara observed them. Julian and Seraphina. It was a masterclass in covert communication. The subtle, almost imperceptible glances that lingered a fraction of a second too long. The way Julian's hand would accidentally brush Seraphina's when reaching for a wine glass. The coded remarks, disguised as business jargon, about new acquisitions and territories yet to be conquered that seemed to carry a double meaning only they understood. It was enough to make Elara's stomach churn, but she maintained her serene facade, a mask of placid motherhood. This was a high-stakes poker game, and she wouldn't be the first to blink. Then Julian, in a seemingly casual remark during a discussion about emerging markets, mentioned the Nightingale account's robust performance. Elara's breath hitched. Was it a deliberate test, a slip of his arrogant tongue, or was he simply so confident in his deception that he didn't care? Across the table, Seraphina's hand instinctively flew to the snake brooch at her throat, her fingers briefly tightening around it. A flicker of something crossed her usually impassive face. Nerves? Fear? It was gone in an instant, replaced by her customary cool composure, but Elara had seen it. The Nightingale account was clearly a sensitive subject, and the snake brooch, Seraphina's totem, was somehow connected. The opportunity Elara had been waiting for, praying for, presented itself as dessert was being served. Clara, the housekeeper, a quiet, observant woman who Elara had subtly cultivated as an ally over the past few weeks, sensing Clara's unspoken disapproval of Julian's increasingly erratic behavior and his blatant disrespect, was serving individual portions of a rich chocolate torte. Elara, feigning a slight stumble, a perfectly timed misstep easily attributable to her advanced pregnancy, accidentally bumped Seraphina's arm. Just a light touch, but enough. Seraphina's wine glass, a delicate crystal flute of expensive champagne, tilted precariously. Red wine, a deep, blood-red vintage Julian favored, arched through the air, splashing dramatically down the front of Seraphina's emerald silk dress. A collective gasp went around the table. "Oh my heavens, Seraphina, I am so terribly sorry," Elara exclaimed, her voice laced with perfectly pitched distress. "Clumsy me. This baby makes me so unbalanced." In the ensuing polite chaos, executives dabbing at the stain with napkins, Julian looking thunderous, Seraphina trying to maintain her composure despite the ruined designer dress, Clara, ever efficient, rushed forward with a damp cloth. As Clara diligently dabbed at the spreading stain on Seraphina's dress, her movements deft and unobtrusive, Elara noticed something on the plush Persian rug beneath Seraphina's chair. A snake brooch. It must have come unclasped in the commotion. What an incredible stroke of luck. Or was it? Had Clara, with a skill Elara hadn't anticipated, somehow managed to dislodge it? Elara bent down, wincing slightly for effect, and retrieved it. "Oh, Seraphina, your beautiful brooch. It must have fallen. You wouldn't want to lose this." She held it out, but before Seraphina could snatch it back, Elara allowed her own fingers to accidentally brush against its underside, just for a second. But it was enough. Her fingertips registered a tiny, almost invisible catch, a minute indentation that felt suspiciously like a release mechanism for a hidden compartment or a keyhole. It was so small, so well hidden. Such intricate work, Elara murmured, her eyes wide with feigned admiration, holding Seraphina's gaze. It must be very precious. Seraphina's smile was now a tight, lipless line. Her eyes, usually so cool and confident, flashed with something Elara could only describe as stark, primal fear. She snatched the brooch from Elara's hand, her fingers closing around it possessively. "It's an antique," she said, her voice a low hiss. "Quite irreplaceable." For a split second, Elara saw the mask slip, the raw panic beneath the polished veneer. And in that instant, she knew. The brooch wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a key, a vital piece of the puzzle. Clara, standing discreetly by the sideboard, gave Elara a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. A silent acknowledgement, an alliance forged in the face of Julian's tyranny. Later, as the last of the executives were making their awkward, slightly wine-stained departures, Julian cornered Elara in the grand marble hallway. His earlier bonhomie had vanished, replaced by a cold, dangerous fury. His grip on her arm was like iron, bruisingly tight. "You seemed quite taken with Seraphina's brooch tonight, Elara," he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "And with Seraphina herself, for that matter. Anything you'd care to elaborate on, my love?" The endearment was a mockery, a poisoned dart. Elara met his gaze, her own surprisingly steady, the icy resolve her grandmother had instilled now a shield around her heart. She could feel the throb of her pulse where his fingers dug into her flesh, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "Just admiring her." "Tenacity, Julian," she replied, her voice calm, almost serene, and wondering naturally what secret such a beautiful, venomous serpent might be guarding so closely. Julian's eyes narrowed to slits, his face a mask of controlled rage. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with the poisonous weight of his lies and her dawning, dangerous knowledge. The game had reached its final, perilous stage. Julian released her arm, but his eyes promised retribution. "Be careful what gardens you wander into, Elara. Some serpents bite." Elara merely smiled, a chillingly calm expression. "Some nightingales sing, Julian, and some cages break." The game had reached its final dangerous stage. Julian released her arm, but his eyes promised retribution. "Be careful what gardens you wander into, Elara. Some serpents bite." Elara merely smiled, a chillingly calm expression. "Some nightingales sing, Julian, and some cages break." The game had reached its final dangerous stage. 2 days later, the silence in the Port Siena penthouse was a taut wire, thrumming with unspoken threats and the heavy weight of impending doom. Zara Kim's final report landed in Elara's encrypted inbox like a meticulously crafted bomb. It was devastating. Page after page detailed direct financial links from Thorne Dynamics' shadowy Nightingale account to a labyrinth of Seraphina Dubois's offshore shell corporations. Payments, millions of them, disguised as art consultation fees, risk assessment services, and exclusive acquisition retainers. Clearly hush money, or worst, payment for illicit services rendered in the darker corners of international finance. Flight manifests, copies of hotel bills from 5-star establishments across Europe and Asia, all meticulously documented, showed Seraphina accompanying Julian on trips he'd claimed were solo business ventures, essential for the expansion of Thorne Dynamics. The depth of his lies, the sheer audacity of his betrayal, was staggering. It wasn't just their marriage he desecrated. It was a vast financial conspiracy. Just as Elara was absorbing the full impact of Zara's final evidence, her anonymous tipster sent one last stark message. "The ledger is his heart, Elara. His entire corrupt world is encoded in its pages. He moves it tonight before he flies out for that phantom conference in Zurich. The serpent always guards the nest before abandoning it. Don't let him take it." Elara understood with chilling clarity. Julian wasn't just going on another trip. He was preparing to flee, to disappear into the anonymous global elite, taking his most incriminating secrets, the ledger, with him. Tonight. This was her last chance. There would be no other. The thought of him slipping away, of him winning this silent war, was intolerable. The front door slammed hours later, the sound echoing through the silent, opulent rooms. Julian, gone to his urgent business, a euphemism, Elara now knew, for his final escape. Elara didn't waste a second. She moved with the swift, cold precision of a surgeon. The first call was to Chloe Davies, her voice a low, urgent command. "Chloe, it's time. Get Alistair. Now." The second was to Alistair Finch himself, briefing him on the new intelligence. The storm was about to break over Julian Thorne's gilded head. Chloe arrived within the hour, a pillar of fierce, unwavering strength. Her presence was a comfort, a tangible reminder that Elara wasn't alone in this. Alistair Finch, a picture of calm professionalism, arrived shortly after, his leather briefcase no doubt containing the legal ammunition they were about to deploy. Clara, the usually quiet housekeeper, was given the night off with a generous bonus and a silent, grateful nod from Elara. Unbeknownst to Julian, Clara, disgusted by his increasingly cruel treatment of a pregnant Elara and his blatant affair with the arrogant Seraphina, had been quietly gathering her own small observations for months. Overheard snippets of conversations, unusual visitors, shredded documents retrieved from Julian's study bin, and had subtly passed invaluable information to Zara Kim, acting as an unexpected but crucial inside source. Every woman has her breaking point, Elara mused. Clara had clearly reached hers. The stage was set. Elara took a deep, steadying breath, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. For her child, for her future. She typed out the text message, her fingers surprisingly steady. "Julian, please come home. The baby, I think I'm bleeding. I'm so scared. Hurry!" She knew it was a low blow, a manipulation. But hadn't he manipulated her for years? Hadn't he preyed on her love, her trust? Turnabout, she thought with a flicker of grim satisfaction, was fair play. And a supposed pregnancy emergency was the one thing she knew he couldn't ignore. Not if he wanted to maintain even a shred of his carefully constructed public image. Panic, raw and undiluted, must have gripped him. He abandoned his clandestine trip to the airport, his plans to retrieve the ledger and disappear. He rushed back to the penthouse, bursting through the door less than an hour later, his usually immaculate suit slightly disheveled, his eyes wide with a convincing display of alarm. "Elara, what's wrong? The baby, are you?" He found Elara standing in the center of the grand living room, bathed in the soft glow of the strategically dimmed chandeliers. She was the picture of calm, of serene composure, her hand resting gently on her stomach. Chloe Davies stood a few feet behind her, a silent, formidable presence. And then, Alistair Finch stepped out from the shadows of the long hallway, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk, Mr. Thorne," Finch said, his voice as cold and sharp as ice. Julian's feigned panic evaporated, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then dawning suspicion. He looked from Elara to Chloe, then to Finch, his eyes narrowing. "What is this? What's going on? Elara, are you all right?" Elara met his gaze, her own voice low, steady, but carrying the undeniable weight of months of accumulated pain and meticulous planning. "I know everything, Julian." She let the words hang in the air, each syllable a nail in the coffin of his lies. "I know about the affair with Seraphina Dubois. I know about the Nightingale account, that slush fund you've been using for God knows what. I know about JT Equity, your little shell corporation. I know about the offshore funds, the secret trips, the endless, sickening lies." She gestured towards the large mahogany coffee table, now laden not with art books, but with neat, damning stacks of files. Zara Kim's final evidence. "And I suspect, Julian, I know about the contents of a certain locked leather ledger you were planning on taking with you on your little trip tonight." Julian's face, usually so artfully composed, went from a ruddy crimson to a ghastly, chalky ash. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, a strangled sound catching in his throat. He tried to bluster, to deny, but his eyes kept darting to the incriminating printouts, his own signature a damning scrawl on more than one document. He looked at Elara then, truly looked at her, and what he saw was not his demure, easily manipulated wife, but a formidable, implacable adversary. A woman he had underestimated. Fatally. "What? What do you want?" he finally rasped, his voice hoarse, defeated. Alistair Finch stepped forward, placing a thick document on the table. The separation agreement, ironclad, comprehensive. It gave Elara substantial assets. The Port Siena penthouse, the Monte Marina villa, the portion of his liquid assets, full custody of their unborn child. and child support payments that would ensure their child's future was secure, insulated from the fallout of Julian's crumbling empire. "Sign it, Julian," Elara said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Sign it all away. Or tomorrow morning, pristine copies of these files, along with Zara Kim's full, unredacted report, and perhaps certain creative interpretations of the Nightingale's song, will find their way to the SEC, the IRS, and a few choice international media outlets that my rather resourceful anonymous friend seems to favor." She paused, letting the threat sink in. "Your call." Julian was trapped, cornered. The predator had become the prey. His gaze darted around the room, seeking an escape that wasn't there. As he reached for the expensive fountain pen Finch offered, his hand trembling visibly, the main doorbell chimed, loud and insistent, shattering the tense silence. Chloe, her expression grim, opened it to reveal two stern-faced detectives from the Port Siena Financial Crimes Unit. Their badges glinted in the low light. "Julian Thorne?" one of them asked, his voice all business. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with ongoing investigations into Thorne Dynamics, and another warrant to search these premises. We received an anonymous, highly detailed whistleblower report this evening concerning something called the Nightingale Protocol and a missing ledger." Julian Thorne, the titan of industry, the master manipulator, visibly collapsed into a nearby armchair, his face a mask of utter, abject defeat. The fight, if there had ever been one left in him, drained away. With a dead hand, a hand that shook uncontrollably, he picked up Alistair Finch's pen and scrawled his signature across Elara's separation agreement. The Empire had not just been challenged. It had been utterly, comprehensively eviscerated from multiple directions, his own and now the law's. As the detectives led a dazed Julian Thorne away in handcuffs, the flashing blue and red lights of their unmarked cars painting chaotic, lurid strokes across the opulent room, Elara felt a profound, shuddering release. The war was over. But the silence that descended in their wake was heavy, not with peace, but with the deafening echoes of shattered lives and the daunting, uncertain prospect of building anew from the smoldering ashes of his betrayal. As the detectives led a dazed Julian Thorne away in handcuffs, the flashing blue and red lights of their unmarked cars painting chaotic, lurid strokes across the opulent room, Elara felt a profound, shuddering release. The war was over. But the silence that descended in their wake was heavy, not with peace, but with the deafening echoes of shattered lives and the daunting, uncertain prospect of building anew from the smoldering ashes of his betrayal. The Thorne Dynamics empire was a smoldering ruin, its king dethroned, but for Elara Vance, the scent of ashes was slowly, almost imperceptibly, giving way to the subtle, clean fragrance of a new dawn. The months that followed were a maelstrom, a dizzying whirlwind of legal proceedings, intrusive media frenzies that picked over the salacious details of Julian's downfall with ghoulish delight, and the quiet, determined work of untangling herself and her child's future from the wreckage of Julian Thorne's spectacularly imploded life. Julian Thorne, once the untouchable titan of Port Siena finance, faced a barrage of charges: massive fraud, embezzlement on an epic scale, corporate espionage that reached into the highest echelons of international business, and even whispers of money laundering for shadowy, unnamed cartels. The infamous locked leather ledger, recovered by authorities from a hidden compartment in his private jet. Clara, the housekeeper, it turned out, had seen Julian place it there just before his ill-fated final trip, and had discreetly informed Zara Kim, who then tipped off the Financial Crimes Unit, sealed his fate. Its meticulously kept pages, penned in Julian's own arrogant script, detailed years of illicit transactions, shell corporations, and the deeply compromising secrets of the Nightingale Protocol. It wasn't just about siphoning funds. The Nightingale Protocol, investigators discovered, was Julian's ultimate insurance policy, a treasure trove of blackmail material, compromising data on powerful figures across the globe, all carefully curated and hidden within a network of Swiss vaults and encrypted digital platforms. Thorne Dynamics, the glittering symbol of his ambition, was dismantled, its assets frozen, its reputation irrevocably tarnished. The fallout was biblical. Heads rolled. Fortunes vanished overnight. The mighty had indeed fallen. And how? And what of Seraphina Dubois, the beautiful, enigmatic serpent in Julian's corrupt Eden? She proved to be as slippery and self-serving as Elara had suspected. Faced with her own set of charges, Seraphina cut a deal. She offered damning testimony against Julian, painting herself as a reluctant pawn in his grand game of deceit. A portrayal Elara found laughably false, but one the prosecutors, eager for a conviction against the bigger fish, seemed willing to accept. Her ruby snake brooch, confiscated as evidence, proved to be more than just an expensive trinket. Investigators found it contained a sophisticated micro-key, a high-tech marvel that unlocked a previously unknown Swiss vault tied directly to the Nightingale Protocol. That vault didn't just hold illicit cash. It held digital ledgers detailing the blackmail operations. In exchange for her cooperation and the contents of that vault, Seraphina Dubois vanished into the obscurity of witness protection, a mere footnote in Julian's spectacular downfall, her own complicity largely swept under the rug. A bitter pill for Elara to swallow, but a small price perhaps for Julian's complete and utter ruin. Justice, Elara was learning, was rarely perfect. Often it was just pragmatic. Guided by the steady hand of Alastair Finch and a new, no-nonsense financial advisor, a woman named Miss Sterling who specialized in untangling the Gordian knots of high-net-worth divorces, Elara meticulously secured her and her child's future. The Port Siena penthouse, once a symbol of her gilded cage, was now hers, free and clear, purged of Julian's toxic presence. A substantial trust fund, firewalled from any of Julian's remaining creditors or legal challenges, was established for the baby. The Monte Marina villa, the New York loft, assets Julian had tried so desperately to hide, were liquidated, the proceeds adding to her child's security. It wasn't about an empire of her own, it was about a sanctuary. The media circus, with its insatiable appetite for scandal, eventually moved on, finding new carrion to pick over. Elara, fiercely protective of her privacy and that of her unborn child, retreated from the spotlight. She focused on her pregnancy, on healing the deep, ragged wounds Julian's betrayal had inflicted. She found solace in the quiet, unassuming rhythms of her new life. Gentle prenatal yoga classes, long walks along the Port Siena coastline, the unwavering, irreverent friendship of Chloe Davies, who remained her staunchest ally and confidant. And in rediscovering the simple, unshakable strength her grandma Isabel had always spoken of. A resilience Elara hadn't known she possessed until she was tested in the crucible of Julian's deceit. The identity of the anonymous tipster, the shadowy figure who had provided those crucial pieces of the puzzle, was never definitively identified. Alastair Finch suspected it might have been a coalition of disgruntled former Thorne Dynamics employees, individuals Julian had wronged or discarded on his ruthless climb to the top. Elara sometimes wondered if it was Clara, working quietly through Zara Kim, a final act of loyalty and quiet rebellion. Or perhaps, as Chloe often joked, it was a genuine guardian angel with a penchant for encrypted emails and a well-developed sense of cosmic justice. The lingering mystery, Elara found, added an unexpected layer of satisfaction. Julian hadn't just been brought down by her actions, he'd been undone by the unseen currents of his own accumulated bad karma. 5 months after Julian's arrest, 5 months after the world she knew had shattered and reformed, Elara stood in the newly decorated nursery of the Port Siena penthouse. The room was a haven of peace, painted in soft, serene shades of sage green and lavender. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the gentle watercolor prints of whimsical forest animals on the walls. A plush, hand-stitched mobile of smiling stars and a benevolent moon hung over the empty crib. Her divorce from Julian was finalized, a quiet, anticlimactic affair conducted through lawyers. He was a broken man, facing decades behind bars, his appeals exhausted, his name a byword for corporate greed and malfeasance. She held her newborn child, a beautiful, healthy baby girl with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that held the wisdom of ancient stars. Looking down at her daughter, Elara felt not the lingering bitterness of betrayal, not the sharp sting of old wounds, but an overwhelming, all-encompassing wave of love and a profound, unshakable resilience. She had not just survived, she had triumphed. She had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, stronger, wiser, and fiercely protective of this new, precious life. The final scene of that chapter of her life unfolded on her private balcony, overlooking the sprawling, glittering expanse of Port Siena as the sun began to paint the eastern sky with strokes of rose and gold. She was no longer the naive, trusting wife in a gilded cage, a beautiful accessory to a powerful man's ambition. She was Elara Vance, a mother, a survivor, a woman who had stared into the abyss and found the strength to build a bridge to the other side. The nightingale's deceit, Julian's treachery, would always be a scar, a somber reminder of the darkness that could lurk beneath the most polished surfaces. But her new song, the one she would teach her daughter, was one of hope, of unyielding strength, and of the enduring, unconditional love that could, in the end, conquer all. The path ahead was hers to chart, free from lies, anchored in truth, bathed in the promise of a brand new day. Sometimes, life can break your heart, but what you do next shows who you really are. Elara found out her husband was lying. He had a secret life, a secret woman, and worse, secret crimes. She could have cried and given up, but she didn't. She stayed calm. She made a plan. She fought back with quiet strength, and in the end, she didn't just win. She protected her baby and built a new life full of hope. This story teaches us something very powerful. Even when people betray us, we can still rise. We don't have to scream. We don't have to break. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who stay silent, think carefully, and fight smart. Elara didn't just survive. She took control of her future. And so can you. If you ever feel like you're stuck or like someone is trying to steal your peace, remember this story. You have the power to protect yourself. You have the right to start over. If this story inspired you, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs strength today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories. You never know who might need to hear this message right now. Let's rise together. Let's protect what matters most. Let's be brave, just like Elara.